Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics and Silicon Curtain Co stream with obviously myself, Jonathan NS Pearce, and Jonathan Fink, the two Jonathans. And my goodness, finally for me anyway, have hopefully the pleasure and the privilege of speaking to Operator Starsky to discuss, I don't know, all things Ukraine, I guess.
Yeah, when you're with the legend, which is Operator Starsky, you can talk about anything under the sun.
Actually, it's my pleasure to be here with you, my friends, and with our dear viewers. I don't think I had a better option for this evening, and I'm totally honored.
Fantastic.
Well, I mean, it's great that some people are making these big choices. Squid Game Season 2, or ATP Geopolitics and Silicon Curtain has got to be ATP Geopolitics every time. I never sound snarky. I just like to ask challenging questions. Will you go for it, Goose? And I have to say, on Squid Games 2, one of my twin sons is just getting me the whole time he's adamant that we're going to shift through that second season. So, yeah, it seems to have caught a lot of people's attention. Jonathan, where do you think we're going to start tonight in terms of topics?
I was going to say, you have time for telly, Jonathan? I thought you were literally on air 100% of the time.
I operate in a time shift and I have the TARDIS like Doctor Who. So
I can't believe you actually have a life. Now, I haven't even seen Squid Games Part 1. I've been hooked into a strange kind of fantasy horror show for 3 years, which is orcs on holiday, and I'm kind of hoping this season comes to an end soon.
Fair enough. Whatever floats your boat, my friend. So Starsky, if I could ask a question to begin with, I've been waiting for an awful long time for Ukraine to be building missiles and drones at scale, because my opinion has long been that the best way Ukraine are going to attrit the Russian economy, military-industrial complex, personnel and material is going to be from a distance, so they don't attrit their own soldiers. One of their objectives has to be to minimize their own casualties. And it's been frustratingly long, but actually in the whole scheme of how to develop missiles and drones, actually quite quick. But when you're sitting there waiting every day, reporting news going, when are Ukraine going to have enough missiles and drones to do devastating damage to Russia? It's been like frustrating. It seems that this last week there's been a step change. Is this how you're reading it? That they're now operating at scale, and this is going to be what we're going to see?
Yes, absolutely. I can see that Ukrainian potential in terms of drones and missiles has increased. Unfortunately, we can say the same about Russia, because it also took Russia almost 3 years to build their capacities of producing drones. Currently, they can and they do strike Ukraine almost every night using 70, 80, sometimes more than 100 drones. A couple of days ago, there was a strike involving 110 drones, and several days before that. So they have already this level when they can produce so many drones that they can literally attack Ukraine with hundreds of them every single night. But we can say the same about Ukraine. Again, of course, the industry capabilities of both countries cannot be compared. Of course, but at the same time, Ukraine had to do this, to make this step, and I'm really glad that we did, because, for example, yesterday night, several Russian military objects were attacked on the territory of Russia. I believe that as much as 15 ATACMS missiles and more than 200 long-range drones were used by Ukraine to strike Russian Kremny L. This is the electronics factory. He was second in terms of production, in terms of the quantity, the amount of the products. Bryansk chemical factory, then Orgsynthos, there is a chemical factory in Tatarstan, almost 1,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, and also the refinery in Saratov and refinery near Angus Air Base. They were also hit. So yesterday it was, I would say, rather intensive or intense night for the Russian citizens that are happy to finally welcome the special military operation moving to the territory of Russia and basically welcoming their war coming home.
I mean, some of those places, the Kremlin, I think that's the second time that's been hit. Engels, the old depot there, I mean, Engels was hit 5 days ago and hasn't stopped burning, a kerosene deposit there. I don't know exactly what part, whether it's the airfield or the old depot or exactly the same place hit again, but Engels twice. I mean, that's absolutely what you want to see. I've been waiting to see Ukraine, because Ukraine have had this habit of striking Russian targets, but using like 3 drones here, 5 drones there, 6 drones there. Whereas I've been waiting for them to go, right, 50 drones at the one place, overwhelm it, different types of drones and missiles, just absolutely take out that facility so it just can't be used again, and then move on. 50 drones there. Have you wondered why they just using a few drones? Is that just they're testing out air defense? I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. It's an attempt to test, to assess the Russian air defense in those areas. Apparently stretched some of their air defenses to different locations, so they need time to get redeployed there. And eventually, hit them with as many drones as required to accomplish the task.
I often think that the air defense, the best analogy I have is that Russia and the occupied territories of Ukraine are like a bed, if you like, and it's a really, really bloody big bed, right? And you've got a blanket that's too small for the bed, and you pull the blanket over to here and it warms you up over there, but then it's cold over there. So then you pull the blanket over there and it pulls it away from here. Then you pull it, and there's not enough air defenses for Russia, being a massive country with so many targets, that they're constantly pulling air defenses from here to there. Then they don't have enough. Do you think that Russia really are struggling for air defenses? I mean, it seems that there are complaints coming. This was just out today. Russians are struggling to comprehend why in the 3rd year of the war, their so-called superpower consistently fails to stop massive waves of Ukrainian drones and remains incapable of countering them effectively. They are now searching for someone to blame. So, people wondering why they can't defend enough.
I mean, this is almost logical, isn't it? It's a vast, vast country, and it has hugely dispersed facilities. And, to your point about hitting it with hundreds of drones, I mean, it's more difficult the further east you go. But I remember at one point taking the Trans-Siberian, and we passed through an industrial area, which I think had been a major tank production facility. And a lot of it was abandoned at that point. This would have been 95, something like that. So a lot of these big Soviet installations were only partly operating, but the single factory complex went on for about 20 miles. That's not just like a town or a city. That is a single factory complex. And it just went on and on and on and on. And of course, your point, one, you can't defend this because you don't have enough air defense to protect civilians and the factories and the airfields. But also it's just a vast, vast, vast territory. I suspect Ukraine, I'd love to hear OS's view on this. I do hear this idea that they do it in waves. They'll target the factories for a while so that the air defense then gets shifted to factories. Then they'll go back to air bases.
Blanket, yeah.
And it's the blanket thing, but it's taking different objectives so that you constantly are stretching the air defense beyond. Now, you might not want to talk too much about the strategy, OS, but did you see a pattern behind what is going on?
Speaking of Russia's air defense, you see, as far as I remember the numbers, they can produce several thousand anti-aircraft missiles on an annual basis. But the difference is this. Of course, Russia can produce plenty of drones that they can just throw at Ukraine every night. But Ukraine receives those missiles from allied countries. Not only Ukraine produces missiles themselves, but also receives missiles that have different range. right? We have Patriots, then on a smaller level we have NASAMS, then on a smaller level we have British missiles that can operate at a range of 5-10 kilometers. And those are used by mobile troops. And Russia doesn't receive their anti-aircraft missiles from anybody, because the closest allies of Russia are, those amazing countries: Iran, North Korea, Syria, not anymore. They receive artillery shells. It's a completely different topic, and of course they pay for that. Nothing comes to Russia for free. Ukraine is supplied by 50 countries, 50 developed countries of the world, and this cannot be ignored. We have enough missiles to defend effectively, but not enough missiles to defend whole vast Ukrainian territory, because again, Ukraine is second largest country in Europe. But as for Russia, they lack resources to defend themselves against the number of drones they use themselves. And Ukraine used twice as many drones only last night. So generally, I believe that it's kind of possible to increase production of those anti-aircraft missiles in Russia. But again, Russia is already fighting on a brink, and they throw all they have at Ukraine. Again, since Ukraine acquired F-16s, they have to keep quite a few of their air defense units at the front lines to cover the operational level along the front lines. So they are in trouble. They're in trouble, and the more they try to increase production, pump up their military industry, the more problems they will have, including problems with manpower, personnel shortage, parts shortage, and things like that.
It's really difficult to get a number on the air defense systems that Russia produces annually, and it's not many. It's going to be at most, those are really high value pieces of kit, and we know that they're really struggling on those types of systems across the whole kind of military domain. And so, I think that attrition is the consistent attrition of air defense, and we know since May 2023, the Ukrainians have gone after air defense as soon as they started their counteroffensive, and it all started not going quite to plan. They realized they've got to take out artillery and air defense, and they've been doing that fairly consistently since. And that's not something that's replaceable at the rates that they are losing it. So I think it is this degradation that could lead to a snowball effect. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the longer this goes on, the more degraded the Russian air defense is, the more Ukraine are able to get through, and the more they're able to degrade the air defenses even more. And hopefully that just snowballs into Russia getting crippled, and that would affect their economy and their ability to produce stuff. But in that in the sense of degradation, what's your opinion? Goose OS has a question. To what extent is the front line constrained by, and this is the classic question really, manpower versus equipment? Previously it was reported that Ukraine was unable to equip its forces already raised, but then we've heard things recently that actually Western equipment is now coming through fairly well. I don't know how true that is, but I imagine that the US and Germany, there's an announcement today that Germany have provided 16% of all equipment that Ukraine are using, which is pretty phenomenal given how many countries are helping. So manpower is the obvious issue that we keep hearing about. What are your views?
Absolutely. One of the probably the biggest key issues here is the manpower. Judging from what we can see and different reports coming from Ukrainians using, for example, Western tanks at the front line, we have parity in tanks. There is, according to Forbes, for example, as far as I remember, Ukraine has parity in terms of tanks comparing to Russia. In terms of artillery, I believe that we are one step further from Russians in terms of precision and range, electronic warfare as well. But Russians still have plenty of manpower, and this is where Ukraine cannot compete much, unfortunately. So currently Russia is betting all they have on their manpower, on their storages that keep depleting, and I believe they will reach their critical point around 2026. Ukraine is betting all we have on our long-range drones, and one interesting report, for example, was published, I believe, last week or the previous week. Ukrainian offense guards, my God, attack guards, Offense National Guard of Ukraine, brigade called Khartia. I know that brigade very well. One of their commanders was my commander one time. So they came with a report that for the first time in history, probably of Eastern Europe at least, this brigade used only drones, only remotely controlled machines in order to conduct ground operation against Russian position. And they published videos showing drones that were equipped with machine guns, the wheeled drones, also FPV drones, and they successfully attacked Russian position. And for the first time here, we can see Ukrainians only utilizing the drones without even without using any infantry, without any risk to the personnel. That's the video, by the way. So I think, remember when I believe 1 year ago, General Zaluzhny was talking about the technologies that we should
in the Economist article, yeah.
Yes, exactly. That we should work more on the technologies and search for a technological solution to the problem that we're facing, and that is exactly what we see. Basically, Skynet against Russia.
That's what Jonathan Fink. Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan Fink. You were talking about that with Ben Hodges only earlier today.
Yes, it was. We were talking about the technological edge, and we'll come on to this in a minute because one of the other. This is the first time in history that a sea drone has been used to actually take out an objective in the air. Absolutely sort of fascinating and a pivotal development in warfare history. But of course, in all these things, it's going to be scale. And novelty is great, but to beat Russia, you need scale because they're throwing a lot of meat into the grinder. I think it'll be interesting when the history books are written because Zaluzhny talked about the difference that technology can make. But one of the sort of, I don't like to report rumors because that's, it's not great to report rumors. But one of the things, supposedly, the areas of friction between Zaluzhny and Zelensky was Zaluzhny also was saying, you've got to get wider conscription. You've got to get more people trained up, and you've got to plan that ahead of time so you put proper training into it. And I think Zelensky is one of those people who said, no, we have to protect, and this is quite understandable. You have to protect the demographics of the country. The demographics are horrifying, and you don't want to send people into this. You don't want an entire generation of your youth traumatized. I think the theory is that the older gentlemen like OS are perhaps better equipped. I mean, we're not superhuman, but better equipped to cope with the mental trauma and recover from it. Whereas if you're 18, this could cause serious danger. So I can see the arguments on both sides. But when you speak to some Western experts, on the one hand, you have people in Washington, they've got to lower the limit, and it's just kind of crass and it's not based on a thing. But when you privately talk, I think, to some military guys, they say, look, they understand the arguments. But in Britain, to win the Second World War, we had full mobilization. We mobilized all the resources, and you try to put as much training in there, and you try to put as much equipment in there to ensure that people are sort of protected or have a better chance of surviving. But there comes a point to achieve victory. You have to go a little bit deeper there. And I think this is a really difficult area of tension, but there are arguments on both sides.
Before Operator Starsky answers that, I mean, obviously, that's a demographic black hole you're talking about in the 18 to 25-year-olds, which presents a real challenge if you want to keep your economy afloat, if you want to get the future. And when you've got a birth rate right down here that can't sustain the older populations, then you need to have children. So if you start mobilizing all these people, then who's going to start having the babies? So we understand that this is a really problematic situation. But to keep this really topical, today we hear that the Air Force has had to come out officially and said, we're not going to send more troops to the front line because we hear that about 150, I think, Air Force personnel, sort of mechanics and whatnot, which is something we criticize the Russians about. And it showed that they didn't have the personnel. Well, the Ukrainians have been doing this with the Air Force, then it's clear that they have personnel issues. So it's on the one hand, you get the arguments that as to why they shouldn't mobilize, and on the other hand, you have arguments as to why they absolutely need to mobilize. So, yeah, just sort of throw that.
The other one for OS is on rotation as well. I mean, again, it's discussed, and it's said that both the Russians have this, so we don't care about that. But Ukrainians have this problem where some people have been at the front for 3 years, and when you don't have the reserves, you can't put people on rotation. You can't give them a break, and that's psychologically and physically devastating, I would imagine.
Regarding the Air Force personnel that was transferred to infantry, I believe we're not talking about regiments. We're talking about size of a platoon. And again, the Air Force consists of many different battalions, like supply battalions, like the automobile service and things like that. So it's not necessarily professional pilots that are trained to operate, sophisticated machinery. But speaking of President Zelensky and General Zaluzhny, they have two different approaches. Of course, personally, I completely understand General Zaluzhny, and I support his points of view, again, as a former military, because when it comes to mobilization, we understand that we need manpower. Of course, manpower is crucial, and we can use a lot of different drones and other remotely controlled machines to eliminate Russian personnel, but it's when infantry steps on the ground, on the soil, and claims the territory. This is how you return your land, basically. There's no other way. You cannot return your land, neither using only tanks, nor only helicopters, or only F-16s. It's just infantry. President Zelensky is speaking from the standpoint of a politician who has his own opinion and probably a bit more information on the social situation in the country. And me, again, as a former military, I'm not really acquainted with the social situation in my country. I'm more acquainted with the military situation. So we can clearly understand both approaches, and of course we need to think more strategically in terms of country. So when it comes to saving the young Ukrainian population that is able to make new families and increase Ukrainian demographics, then I think that is also important, because we should not forget about such things as well. They're crucial.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the Ukrainians have done possibly quite a good stopgap. So they haven't gone for like full mobilization of 18 to 25-year-olds, but what they have done recently is introduce military service and military training, which means that those in education and those not in education will get military training of differing types, so that if they are then called up during that time, or even after they get past 25, then they'll have the basics of training, and it makes it more efficient. Rather than mobilizing someone and then having to put the training in, you can mobilize any one of those people because they've already been trained up to a specific level. So that's like going to improve it somewhat, but yeah, this is just a huge challenge. The other thing they're doing, and this kind of answers a Goose Springsteen comment or question. He says, is it the case that volunteers can influence their area of service? I'm sure OS will speak to this, that they can actually, there is an ability to choose where they can go to some degree. How does an army get enough regular infantry per specialist? So then I think what he's aiming at here, which is a really good question, which is, well, most people would just choose to be a drone pilot rather than an infantryman going to serve in a trench line. So, how does that all work? Do you have any knowledge about that?
So we have companies of drones. We call them, Рубак, рота управляемых беспилотных, company of remotely controlled machines, right? So we have only as much companies, and those companies require only as much operators. Of course, our army cannot completely consists only of the drone operators, but at the same time, several days ago I've heard from a spokesman for our recruitment in the army, and he said that this is generally something we are aiming at in the future. So in Ukraine, in the future, we will have more people recruited that can operate drones. They will receive proper training and things like that, because I suspect that strategically Ukraine is aiming at digitizing its infantry. What I mean is involving more drones, more FPVs and things like that in those areas where you can replace the infantry. So if the task is to physically eliminate your enemy, not defend the position per se, not to take the position, but literally eliminate enemy, eliminate the logistics and armored vehicles, ammo storages on a tactical and operational
Which is
level.
what you're talking about with UGVs as well. Unmanned ground vehicles can do a lot of that. It's a bit like getting towards Terminator, but you're it's about replacing human beings with more expendable machines.
Yes, absolutely. And you also can, of course, build new machines, and you cannot build new people. That is a big difference. That's why I believe that probably
Terminator.
probably in the observable future, we will see Ukraine recruiting Skynet basically to the service in the armed forces of Ukraine.
Well, OS, I wanted to jump in because one of the themes we're having on the channel at the moment is looking at civil society within the military. And, we know from talking to various people, yourself included, I spoke to Antti Tiller recently about, the first days of the war. And then there's 2014. I mean, Ukraine, I'm assuming from what I've heard from people, Ukraine would not be here. It would not be free if it wasn't for civic society mobilizing in 2014 in Donbass. And in the case of Mariupol and Odessa, simply stopping the Russian provocations, but also getting together, whipping together equipment, clothing. If you look back at those images of 2014, it's very ragtag. It's not like the sort of, I won't say clean uniforms, but the sort of, we have common uniforms, we have the tags, we have the tape, and you use like, that's Ukrainian soldier, and they're usually sort of smart, and they look nothing like 2014. But in conversations I've been having, it seems that civic society is still the driving force behind a lot of the innovation in technology that we're talking about, and that there's a real struggle taking place between elements of the military that were trained in the Soviet era and are perhaps really, these techniques are there for people to learn, but not everyone's innovative and not everyone's open to ideas, and not everyone has a more democratic, open, let's sort of idea of how these things should work and getting ideas up through the ranks. And of course, this can cause mistakes. It can cause the innovations that are taking place in one battalion not to be learned to transition to another. I understand this is quite a debate going on. If there's any area you don't feel comfortable with, then just, ignore it. But I'm fascinated by how civic society is still critical to Ukraine's victory, and how civic society could be enabled further, and the state could learn from that, and what the barriers are to that learning process.
Yeah, we saw one very interesting thing here during the past 3 years. All the people who were claiming that there was a coup in Ukraine, Ukraine turned into American puppet and things like that, they can't really understand how come the power, the West that allegedly was controlling Ukraine, cannot provide Ukraine with enough support, enough military support, but the people from around the world and people inside Ukraine, they play probably the key role in this battle because they inspire, they finance the Ukrainian armed forces, they invent technologies, and that's like what I see every single day. Every single day, I receive emails from people who view our channels, who view my channel, and they say like, "Okay, I have like this invention, like death rays that can like burn people at distance. Can you give me some contact?" I have no idea,
Do you know
unfortunately.
what? I've received heaps of those emails as well. I get like me, like just some random YouTuber, like I've got this idea of how to blow up this and that. Who can I send
Yeah.
it to you? I'm like, well, not me for a start. I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't have such contacts, but that's another proof that people not only in Ukraine but also around the world, they are united with this idea of defending democracy, defeating Russian terrorism, and they are very, very much dedicated. And I would say that those people make good example of to different politicians, because those people are dedicated to help Ukraine win the war, to punish Russian terrorists. And because Russian terrorists are also very, very much dedicated to their hybrid warfare, to their genocide against Ukraine, and they have extremely strong desire to win this war. It's not like they're literally, commanded, forced to fight. Sometimes they are, but generally they accept the idea of spreading violence and retransmitting the violence that is retransmitted to them by their ruling elites, their ruling regime. And Russian citizens on the level of their society, they accept it. They accept the fact that yes, they will go to a different country and kill people, and they have extremely big desire to win this war. That's why it's extremely, extremely important that we have such dedicated people. I would really say defenders who are also very, very much dedicated to help defend Ukraine and help defeat Russian terrorism.
What about the discussion and how does discussion look in Ukraine with regard to diaspora community, Ukrainians outside, people who maybe left at the beginning of the war, maybe fled, maybe even escaping mobilization themselves, but also people we know that the Polish have started this Ukrainian the Polish Legion or whatever, an international legion in Poland, where they're taking people who are probably many of them already living outside of Ukraine at the start of the war in 2022 at least, who have it gives them an opportunity to join up, get decent training, decent equipment, hopefully, and then that's more likely to attract them to go and fight in Ukraine. But what's the challenge with getting Ukrainians back, and the kind of the carrot or the stick, and what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, we are in the situation when the people we could really rely on, like volunteers, I'm talking the volunteers in Ukraine, they left to the front lines during the first days. Same as in 2014. All those who were able to fight and the most dedicated people, they already left to the front lines. Unfortunately, a lot of them died. Unfortunately, a lot of them also died during such periods, for example, when we could not receive the promised military supplies from, for example, the United States for almost half a year. And the situation is the best of Ukrainian soldiers were dying during such periods. And after that, our Western partners are saying, guys, okay, now you have to like decrease the mobilization age because, you know, the best of those defenders died. So, in
Which
my
they
opinion,
did. They moved the age from 27 to 25, didn't they? Which was something.
Yes. So the situation is, of course, it's really hard to return people who completely don't want to fight, who are scared. But I believe that our biggest weapon that we can, not weapon, but assistance that we can provide to those people is motivate them. And it's really hard to motivate people who I believe already gave up, on Ukraine, and they see their future in other countries. Again, yes, it's their choice, but we have to, in my opinion, again, invest more into combat technologies and produce more machines that will not, of course, replace infantry completely, but they can perform 2/3 of their tasks. And I believe that this is how we can withstand, at least for a while, and let some of our infantry rest, and maybe the new recruits that will reach the necessary age will also join the army. Again, we were talking about Zaluzhny. I completely support his opinion that, yes, we need to decrease the mobilization age. In 2014, 2015, I got enlisted voluntarily, literally because I didn't want to see young Ukrainian people going to the Donbass and, die there for Ukraine. But 10 years later, I realized that those people had all chance to learn, to acquire necessary tactical skills. And now they can basically join the armed forces of Ukraine. But again, I don't see this happening in the nearest future. Maybe again, Ukrainian top management developed this digitizing the infantry solution, the Skynet. I call it Skynet for no obvious reason. I just like the movie. Maybe they found the solution to this demographic problem in terms of personnel. We will see. I cannot talk much on this because, unfortunately, I don't have direct connection to the top management. But this is the tendency that for example, I can see personally.
What do you think Ukraine need most of? Like, if you were obviously boots on the ground, but in terms of equipment, like if you were in charge of the procurement, what would you be asking for? Storm Shadows or Bradley? What's the one thing that Ukraine needs most of at the moment?
If we can use Storm Shadows, I would go for Storm Shadows, of course. Because in order to use Bradleys properly, we also need a lot of other equipment, which is demining equipment, which aircraft to provide close combat support and close air support and things like that. It's really cool to have Bradleys. I completely agree on that. I never had chance to drive one or test one, but I have experience of operating BTR-3 as a company sergeant, and I can tell that those machines are, of course, very, very much necessary at the front line. But in such environment where you cannot perform the ground operations effectively, for example, like South Ukraine during the counteroffensive, when Russian troops had almost half a year to prepare their positions, to build layers of defense, to build plenty of minefields and effectively stop Ukrainian armored vehicles and tanks. I believe that Storm Shadows will be more effective. Again, it's a tricky question because here we're talking about two completely different levels, because Storm Shadows are effective at the strategical level, Bradleys are on the tactical level. So it's like comparing sweet and warm, you know.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. Over to you, Jonathan. Or no?
No, I am here. It's a sticky button there. It's fascinating. We should remind people, Jonathan, if you want to do a quick sort of summary of the fundraiser we've got running, we should have a couple of little reminders in there as we sort of close out for the day.
Yeah, so we are, and in fact, some people are very kindly doing that through YouTube, but there are links in the description to both our description boxes for help for the trip that we are taking very soon to get vehicles. We're taking personally 3 vehicles out ourselves to Ukraine. We're going to drop them in Ukraine. We're going to go to Kiev, Lviv, Kiev, and we'll hopefully get some recording done, meet some people at some point in the future, a bit of operational security, but this will obviously incur costs, fuel and accommodation and whatnot. So we are just, if you do have the ability to help, the wherewithal, then it's obviously very much appreciated. Petra Olsen here has helped BME, also likewise with all the super chats and questions from Goose Springsteen and Julian Rossiter, of course. And in fact, Claire Ulrich, it's gotta love the two Jonathans and of course the iconic Starsky. She is helping out hugely with Car for Ukraine and is actually the person who kind of reached out to, certainly to me, to get me involved in this. So it hopefully that's explained to some people, just to say thanks to those who have been doing that during this live chat. So thank you to Ida, thank you to Kevin Forst, as mentioned, thank you very kindly for your memberships, and Petra Olsen, as I said, and to all the people such as Paul Gilbert, here's the upcoming journey, etc., etc. Richard Bennett, who's always such a great supporter of my channel. So hopefully that's done justice to what's needed. Anything? I mean, you've got a few more details about what you're hoping to do, Jonathan.
Yes. So obviously, interviews are important. The events are important. We don't want to give too many details because of security reasons. I remember telling OS about 2023 and the kind of fun experience we had with not just Russian sort of trolls, typing away on keyboards, but actual physical agents were assigned to try and disrupt the event. They called up some of the speakers, they invented stories, they dug for dirt, and they tried to put people off by telling some of the guests that other guests were being investigated by Ukrainian intelligence. I mean, this is interesting, for me at least, is the point at which they go from, a bunch of people sitting somewhere in a St. Petersburg suburb just tapping away or using bots and trolls to the point where they actually assign a physical agent. Because if you imagine it in the terms of a project or a marketing agency, that's considerably more costly. You have to plan a project, you have to brief an individual, you have to put their time aside. They can only work on a small number of projects at a time because it's much more intense than if you're just, sticking comments against someone's channel, negative comments. So that's kind of fascinating. But of course, a lot of volunteers that you've spoken to, Jonathan, and a lot that the OS will know, they get targeted on a regular basis with hacking attacks, with trolling activity, and it can escalate all the way up to the point of threats against their lives.
Well, surely, I mean, Operator Starsky's probably, more than either of us has been the brunt of. Do you have any experience of being the brunt of Russian cyber? And I mean, what's yours? Hopefully, you're nice and safe in your life at the moment.
Speaking of death threats, I believe during first months I received thousands of death threats on my channel and on my email. That's when my channel only started speaking in English to the international audience. And of course, I received like multiple. There was this video we made with Stas where I was addressing the Russian invaders. And I believe it was one of the first videos that we made. And it made something like 1 million views very fast, and there were a lot of commentaries from Kadyrovite Chechens and things like that, who promised all kinds of sadomasochism you can imagine. But speaking of cyber attacks generally, I received several messages about somebody trying to, breach my Xbox account and email and Instagram. Not a lot of them. The reason is that I use different passwords on different platforms. I already forgot like half of them, but generally it's like different passwords for different platforms, different passwords regarding of importance of this platform or service, and of course double authentication and things like that. So I rarely receive those messages, when someone is trying to reset my password and things like that. Nothing special. But also you have to change your passwords time to time, and you have to have them like very, very strong. If your password is Ukraine, I applaud, but please change it for something like stronger, because
I don't note that down.
I heart Ukraine. You don't want that,
Yeah, my shortest password is I believe around 21 symbols, and so yeah, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah. Jonathan, is it okay to put this one of your questions from your viewers here on your site, mostly polling the chat? Will Putin's government, first of all, will it collapse? Will it collapse abruptly and without warning, or will it be a clear, defined decline to the very end? In fact, do we think that Putin's government will collapse? What I wonder what OS's views on how this ends, and will it end with yeah.
The answer has to be no one knows. So you have to talk in terms of probabilities rather than this is definitely going to happen or definitely not. All we can point to is that in 1917, if you did a straw poll on the streets of, say, St. Petersburg, who's heard of Lenin? Who's heard of Trotsky? Who's heard of the Bolsheviks? You'd be like, who? Literally no one would know who these characters are. No one whatsoever. And that tells you something about, Russia, that where you have a radically depoliticized population, it doesn't matter. You can't predict who's going to come next, because if the current regime falls dramatically and suddenly, it could be anybody. So you have to ask the question, who can gain power and hold on to it? It's not so much who is that character going to be, but who can take the reins of that country, and how do they take the reins of that country? And the answer is kind of quite depressing, because yes, Putin's regime could crumble at some point. It could be replaced by an oligarch or oligarch faction, or someone nobody's heard of, literally nobody's heard of, and we're unlikely to see things at a deep level changing. We're unlikely to see systemic change and the rooting out of the FSB class. So yes, the faces may change. Everyone might change chairs on the Titanic, but we need to be talking more about systemic fundamental change and the fragmentation of Russia itself. I'll throw this over to us because, of course, talking to Ukrainians, and I'm of the Ukrainian point of view, that it would be wonderful, actually, for that country to fragment and to liberate the various nations that are held captive by their empire. But they've been in there for a long time, and very few of the ethnic people who are dominated by Russia, they didn't have nation states. They didn't have the kind of history of, I would say, sort of almost anarchic freedom that the Ukrainians had. They didn't have a history of being an established European state and going through various processes of being on the periphery of them, like the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and various things. They don't have any of that. They weren't a nation state. They're not used to democratic politics. We have to we have to unfortunately say that I don't know how likely it is that it will fully fragment. But certainly it's weak, and certainly it's an empire in decline. And, its disintegration could be slow and extremely messy, but will it systemically change underneath? I mean, that's difficult to say. Something will happen. That's for certain. It cannot be sustained at the current level. That is absolutely clear. It's heading for some kind of cataclysm. OS.
I believe that decline is, of course, possible, but only in peaceful times. When you see, for example, last months of presidency of any given president, right, of any given country, when people literally either don't care or openly hate this person. Because look at all what he did and things like that, and generally we can almost feel the decline of the population of this leader in the society. But in Russia, in the wartime and in the times of different revolutions, such things, of course, happen. Suddenly, right? All of a sudden. You cannot really predict that, okay, tomorrow we will see this person either consuming cyanide or hanging upside down on his balcony. Nobody can predict that. Of course, it will, in my opinion, it will not happen well. It will not end well for Putin. I believe that with the end of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, we will also see the end of his life path. And of course, it will be a surprise to everybody, but a good surprise, right? A pleasant surprise. To me, for example. I'm Ukrainian. I don't care what you think about it. But such things always happen suddenly. You receive a message. Syria, who could predict,
good
3 months ago, that we will see people that yesterday were considered terrorists and part of Al-Qaeda, and today they say we reject that way of fighting, we support democracy, and you see them walking around the palace of Bashar Assad. Who could predict that thing to happen? So such things always happen suddenly and unexpectedly. That's the word.
Yeah, and there are some good signs for Ukraine. The good sign, so to be as positive as possible for Ukraine, the Russian economy is looking really shaky. There are loads of indicators. The US have now got serious about sanctions. I mean, it's too late. Well, it's not too late, but it is late. But the EU and the US and other countries, including Japan, are getting serious about sanctions. Hopefully that's going to have an effect. We've got material problems for the Russians. They're running out of tank. There's a Forbes article this week saying that in certain places on the front line, the Ukrainians have arguably a tank advantage, which is very interesting. I look at the lost stats every single day, and there are material issues for the Russians. They're using golf buggies, motorbikes, quads, and even Bukankers and unarmored vehicles as combat assets. Things are looking desperate here. Julian Roster says the Russians are now reportedly fitting glide bombs to their more modern jets. Surely that's a good sign. So on the one hand, they are going to be using more modern jets rather than MiG-31Ks that they're using for, say, Kinzhal. Hypersonic missiles are now trying to fit them to Su-34s, I think, which means that they're probably running out of flight hours for their older jets, which means, there's all this attrition taking place and all the personnel problems, but yet they're still advancing on the grounds. But is it all about the ground? Is it actually, is Ukraine playing a bit of a long game, say, okay, it's not about the ground, we need Russia to collapse, but then they're losing their bargaining chips if they're losing territory? Any thoughts on that?
Jonathan? No.
Fumbling for the button again. Oh no, I'll let you talk while I get my thoughts together. I'm not sure what I'm going to say.
Okay, I will answer this with a simple example that I literally learned personally last week. Okay, speaking of Russian progress, Russian collapsing environment inside of their country. 2023, I believe a lot of my viewers already heard that, the Russian Ministry of Education reported that they lack space to accommodate 900,000, almost a million, Russian kids at schools, because 1/3 of Russian schools required renovation in Russia. So, of course, some budget was assigned to solve this problem, which is a normal thing, logical thing. So one third of schools in Russia in total required renovation in 2023, report as of September. According to the report of September 2024, already 1/2 of Russian schools required renovation.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
but at the same time, they have enough resources to increase their production of drones, to increase production of missiles, to buy shells and howitzers in North Korea, because there's nothing more important than killing Ukrainians. So the question is, will these states survive the war of attrition? I don't see this happening at all. Another good example, last week, I believe, I talked to my friend Roman Bray, the sniper, Ukrainian sniper, who said that he talked to his friends from the UAV company. And he was bragging like, last month I personally killed something like 100 orcs, right? And the snipers were like, how the hell is it possible? Like, oh my God, Russians keep training their Spetsnaz, their snipers, their experts of contactless combat using Orthodox cross and stuff like that. Ukrainians train UAV operators because this brings more result. Again, if we compare, for example, Russian amount of tanks that they had previously and they have currently, and, for example, the amount of armored vehicles and tanks in Europe, we're not talking about the United States, but literally in Europe. Of course, majority of tanks in the world, in our part of the world, are located in Russia. That is, again, logical, and we all can understand that. They were stockpiled for almost a century. But at the same time, considering the experience acquired in Ukraine and acquired even earlier, like during the war in Iraq, when several, for example, American tanks could eliminate a regiment of Soviet-produced tanks without, facing significant casualties. It tells us that that quantity is not always quality. And we should, as I said, keep modernizing our weaponry, keep investing in the technological solution that will help us eliminate so many Russian invaders, so they will literally have nobody to fight with. And the more I see those technologies developing in Ukraine, because currently Ukraine is not only building drones, it also exports drones, which is important. We are not only buying stuff, not only receiving stuff as a land lease, but we can also export our drones, and we already do that since the last year. Looking at that, I believe that such situation, when you literally have enough technologies that can allow you to eliminate the enemy personnel so it's unable to continue its aggression, I believe that this scenario is pretty much possible.
Jonathan, did you have collected your thoughts?
I'm not sure, I've got that much to add. The question is, I think this is long in planning, building up the sort of scale of being able to sort of strike back and use technology. It doesn't just happen overnight. Similarly, with the Ukrainian missile program, they didn't just suddenly whip up a missile in a couple of weeks. This would have been based on technology that's been years in the making. It would have been, Soviet technology that's sort of been repurposed, brought up to date. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these programs were kicked off, shortly after Kiev was liberated and Kherson. These are programs that are many, many months in the making, which leads us to wonder, maybe not out loud, but wonder what other programs Budanov and his team have that we don't yet know about, because there'll be a lot of innovation. I mean, the same with this drone that took out airborne objects. Extraordinary kind of achievement. But what other crazy novel stuff is being dreamed up. But I think the scale of components is important. We heard recently that China had started to block off the ability for Ukraine to import and buy, and Western partners to buy certain components in clear support of their Russian partner. We need to continuously attack this idea that China is a neutral party. No, it's leaning on the scales heavily in favor of Russia. One could ask, why is it doing that? Does it love Russia and general Russianness? No, it likes the idea of authoritarianism. It doesn't like authoritarian regimes falling. But at the same time, it's win-win for China. If Russia wins, authoritarianism wins, China's still the biggest partner and Russia's dependent on it. If Russia disappears and collapses, then the Chinese can send in peacekeeping troops to retake Manchuria and big chunks of Russian territory. Who knows where this is going to go? One of the scenarios that plays around in my head is you could have a dash to Moscow with the Chinese heading from the south, the Western powers heading from the east, to see who can grab as much Russian territory as possible before the lines of demarcation are frozen. This would have been, people would have said you're insane a few years ago if you'd said this. These scenarios are not, quite honestly, looking insane anymore. I mean, they may not be a high probability, but there's not a zero chance of this happening.
Yeah, and it's... sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I completely agree on that. Like a couple of years ago, if you mentioned that Ukraine will be incurring the Russian territory, people would laugh at you. But today you can walk around the Kursk Oblast of Ukraine and see things with your own eyes.
Thursday, we're speaking to Sergei Sumleny, who has just had a little picnic in Kursk. So we'll be hearing from an eyewitness who's just come back from there. Just thought I'd let you know.
So had my friend Brandon Mitchell, by the way. He just returned from that area of historical Ukrainian territory and brought some of his footage as well that you can see on his channel. Speaking of drones, the drones that intercepted Russian helicopters, which by the way was, even though they are like helicopters, right? They have like short range, like extremely limited range of operations and things like that. But training a helicopter pilot is an extremely hard task. Helicopter pilots are like the toughest guys. For real.
And they lost 8 crew members within like 4 days, and maybe 4 whole helicopters were taken out.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible. And the drone that did it was armed with Soviet-made air-to-air missile, actually.
Yeah, R-73s.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe that soon we will see some extremely interesting innovations, if we can call them this way, by the Ukrainian armed forces. But just to understand the timeline, okay? What it takes to come up with the idea of a long-range weapon like a drone, and then like build it. I remember 2023. We were in the bomb shelter with civilians, I lived not far from a gym that was used as a bomb shelter for civilians in my area. They were like 3 minutes away, and I had a keys because I basically lived in that gym. So whenever there was air alert, I would go there and open, and civilians would come over and stop. I remember we were sitting there, civilians were literally like donating because Russia was hitting Ukraine with drones. And people that were sitting and reading the news and listening to those explosions outside, they were literally like donating, their salaries to Ukrainian drone charities like crazy. And I read, while all this was happening, I read a message from one of my friends working in Ukroboronprom, who showed like a warhead of a drone, and he said, look at this drone will have the range of 100 kilometers. It will be armed with a warhead, I don't remember exactly, 40 or 70 kilograms of explosives. We started building this drone last year, so in 2022. In 2023, they only made this public, okay? And I think that it was rather, like a gesture to improve morale of Ukrainian people that were literally shocked with those massive waves of Russian drone attacks. And only next year, we heard about the first long-range drones attacking Russia, going all the way to like Chechnya and things like that, like Kaspi.
Well, literally, like you're saying, OS, like who would have thought a couple of years ago, like Tatarstan, here we've got like, and this is Dagestan, sorry, a factory being slammed there. And just to talk to what we talked about earlier, Engels is apparently being targeted again tonight, which is perfect. Third time, you've weakened, and now it's possibly open season at Engels, where you've got the air base there that then they take up. So these things take time, but it could be that we are at that moment where, as I think you're hinting, we're starting to see this come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this will only escalate, not necessarily tomorrow, because I think that we need to analyze the index of success of this strike and plan other strikes, and of course come up with distractions to stretch Russian air defense a bit more, and then we will see those attacks only escalating, because again, it was said recently that Ukraine has something like 3,000 drones. Was it 30,000 drones? Oh my God, I'm sorry, I have this dementia and I keep forgetting the numbers. There's so many of them.
A lot of drones.
Over the past, but we will see more attacks involving not tens, but hundreds of drones that Russia literally cannot do anything against.
I guess as we sort of meander towards a close, Jonathan, just a few more sort of thanks and things coming in. Is there anything you wanted to say to what Operator Starsky was saying there?
I like that comment, by the way. It's just a slight ironic comment there of send the Scientologists to,
Julian Roster, awesome. Next time you talk to John Sweeney, both of us have interviewed him. Ask if he could, because he famously went over to America, did a panorama program, I think it was, on Scientology. It was super famous because he ended up screaming at this guy that had been sort of reverse, following John Sweeney for all that time. They're now friends, I think, or he might have just died actually recently or something. Anyway, but yeah, send the Scientologist. There's a few other thanks. And a comment here, Goose Springsteen. I don't know if we've got time.
He's back.
It's an interesting one, this. So the red and black flag is actually a Cossack flag. So he says it's a very sensitive topic, but how are externally controversial symbols like the red and black flag? So outside of Russia, outside of Ukraine, Russians call this kind of bandera flag, like it has these kind of fascist connotations. But actually, my friend James from Why in Ukraine, he proudly has a red and black flag behind him because he sees it as a Cossack colours, which is where those colours originally come from. You can see in old Renaissance paintings and stuff like the Cossack, I think, flags, red and black flags. So it's right to say it's externally seen often as controversial. How are they seen in Ukraine now in 2025? Has that closer relationship with Poland since the 2022? Interesting that they're exhuming those bodies for the massacre from 1945 with Poland. So that's interesting.
That's a good development. That's a good development. Before OS jumps in, you just have to look at a little bit of footage of Russian demonstrations, including ones that Navalny attended 10 years ago or so, and the sheer variety of combinations of clear fascistic symbolism, because it's not evolved from 19th, 18th, 17th century, although Russia, goodness me, had quite a bit of, pseudo-fascistic or proto-fascistic stuff with the Black Hundreds and so on in the 19th century. But there's a clear sort of evolution of fascistic symbolism combined with orthodox symbolism. You've got sort of Nazi stuff and icons all mashed in together. I mean, goodness me, anyone who says like, what about Ukraine? What about Ukraine? What about Russia? Russia is it oozes this sort of weird, masochistic, fascistic kind of weirdness. But OS, over to you.
Yeah. Short trip into the history of Ukrainian nation, right? Black and red colors are deeply in Ukrainian history and Ukrainian culture. We have a beautiful song that is like ancient, two colors. Червоне то любов, а чорне то журба. The red is for love, and the black is for sorrow. This is like in Ukrainian, like ancient history. Red and black colors were always like walking along with the Ukrainians since ancient times. Okay, the question is, what do you put into those colors, right? Do Ukrainians put into those colors things like hatred towards Polish people, or like massacring of people of Volhynia or things like that? No, they don't. Do they what kind of meaning do they see in those colors? Exactly that, what you see on your screens. Ukrainian embroidered shirts that are extremely popular over the past 3 years all around the world. They come embroidered in black and red colors because those are our national colors. So to Russians, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. Either it's like black or red, or yellow or blue, or like literally just black, but you speak Ukrainian. If you speak Ukrainian or support Ukraine, you're already like Nazi and Bandera. That is like 100%. Even if you're a Jew, even if you're Polish yourself, you are Nazi and Bandera if you support Ukraine. Why are those topics raised so often? Those topics are raised so often by Russians who literally want to solve the discord between two nations, because Ukrainian nation and Polish nation, despite all the crap that we had between, like calling it crap will probably be disrespectful towards the numerous victims on both sides, but this deepest tragedy that we had back in those days, despite all that, nowadays we're probably the most united nations of the Eastern Europe fighting against Russians. And Ukrainian help to Poland and Polish help to Ukraine, our mutual partnership, our numerous military exercises like 2019 Rapid Trident in Yavoriv. I was showing the BTR to the Polish colleagues and stuff. All this confirms only one thing, that unlike Russia, unlike the terrorist federation, European nations like Poland and Ukraine, they can evolve. It doesn't mean that we should just forget what happened. No, we should remember that forever in order to make sure that this will not repeat in the future. And I'm pretty sure that we both remember this, and we will never make it happen again. And this is the foundation of a true partnership and friendship. This is the way all the nations should, the direction all the nations should think in. Of course, Russia doesn't like it so much. Russia just hates it, and that's why you can hear so many of those narratives, trying to raise the topic again and again in my commentaries as well. When I see some Ivan asking, what about Volhynia? I will talk about Volhynia to Polish people, you idiot. Like, it's not your business whatsoever. Your business is responsibility for Katyn, for example, right? That is Russian responsibility, which, by the way, they never admitted for some reason.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, what you're referring to there is the Katyn massacre, I presume, there. So if people want to pause the video in this live stream and read Wikipedia, they're very welcome to. More thanks there, Marion Sains. Thank you on Jonathan Fink's behalf, one of your viewers, Jonathan. Palvi as well. We probably don't have time to read all of these out, but thank you so much. Really, really kind of you. Javier Alvarez, great conversation for the trip and the coffee tea fund. It's obviously a tea fund.
I'm going to be drinking a lot of tea.
True that.
A lot of tea.
True that. I mean, no change from my normal daily life. Kobe Jack gifting those ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you. S Grut 3. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you. Keep up the awesome support. So thank you for your viewership and kindness. And Palvi again. Ukraine gave drones. Finland Molotov cocktails. Finland have actually been. Finland's an interesting one. I'm not going to keep this going too long. But Finland don't tell the world what they're giving to Ukraine. They're one of the nations that do not they're not transparent in a way, say Germany and the US are, mainly Germany particularly very transparent in what they give to Ukraine. Finland don't tell anyone, and so I guess in years to come we'll look back at the conflict and we'll find out what each nation did, and who supplied this and who gave satellite access and all these kind of finer details, and whose special forces were operating where, and stuff like that we're not really allowed to talk about.
I dare say it, the Finns understand Russians more than anyone. I think it's like Ukrainians first, Finns next, because of course they kicked Russia's butt, against Stalin. Yes, they lost some territory, but the greater victory was remaining independent, and then surviving. The next sort of 70 years or so, 100 years now beyond that, but. Absolutely extraordinary achievement, which humiliated Stalin and the young sort of Soviet empire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Finns have my and always had my total respect, because very tiny, very tiny, but extremely proud and extremely, in positive meaning, crazy nation, like patriots. You're attacking us. Okay, watch this. They torn 300 Russians to shreds in such a professional way. So me as a Ukrainian, I can only envy and applaud. So don't F with Finns. They're tough guys.
There's another commonality I wanted to throw in, which Starsky and I have talked about before, but Finns were seen by the Russian Empire as, if Ukrainians were seen as thieves or peasants, which are the two sort of archetypes there, Finns were just seen as peasants and fishermen, simple fishermen living in a swampland. What have they got that our great and glorious Russian Empire can't have? If you go to Helsinki, you'll see the absolutely sort of hideously ugly Orthodox church, which was plonked on there the sort of gift of Russian culture. And there are many countries in the former empire where you see those, rather ugly 19th century, Orthodox cathedrals. That's not to say there aren't some nice Orthodox cathedrals, because they did design some nice ones, but they gave all the ugly ones to the colonies that they sought to dominate. But how do you feel about that? And this is the last thing. How do you feel, OS, about that? Those sort of stereotypes, and is that another area of commonality you have with, say, Finns?
Why the stereotypes is because Russia needs to demonize and ridicule its enemies, because you have to have some kind of reason for your population to go and die in that land, right? So they have to at least hate them, at most like hate and despise them.
And make them less than human. I mean, dehumanize them, or at least make them less worthy humans.
Yes, absolutely. Because here in Ukraine, Russia only fights against Ukrainians when Russia wins, right? So Russians took Ukrainian position. Russians captured Ukrainian vehicles, for example. But when Russians die, they usually die because Polish mercenaries shot them. American special force attacked them with Apache F-22 and Tomahawks and things like that. That is why they hate and despise Ukrainians. But when they see their military objects, like military factories and stuff, burning on the Russian territory, that is literally because that is evil NATO. Like those are not Ukrainians; those are like Polish and French mercenaries and American Navy SEAL and things like that.
I've never seen a film. I'm sure there must be a Finnish film, but I've never seen a film on the White Death. Simo Haiha, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but the guy, didn't he kill over 500? So he's a sniper that took out over 500 German Nazi soldiers in the Winter War. German soldiers Soviet Union. So Soviets. Yeah. No, it wasn't in the Second World War. It was against the Soviets. I'm sure there's a film made about him, but I mean, what an incredible guy. I think he even got shot in the face, did he? Had a face disfigurement at the end, and quite an incredible story of him. But nonetheless, last two thanks. King Raccoon, for you, Jonathan. He's on yours tonight. Good luck with the trip. I love to JP and Starsky too. Good on you, mate. And Tim Vermorgan for some Russian butter on those crumpets with the tea. That's about what Russian butter costs at the moment. In fact, they have those anti-theft things around all sorts in Russian supermarkets these days.
Doesn't buy you much butter though. I mean, it literally, hotel-sized portion.
Yeah. Thank you very much to all of those in the live chat. Some very generous help to support to us, and also some good questions and comments. Is there anything we haven't talked about? Anything that's you deem, OS, that needs to be said at the moment? Is there any particular subject that's burning on your mind?
Not really. The biggest update was regarding the strikes on the Russian facilities. The Russian refinery near the Engels was attacked. That is according to my sources. So there was a fuel storage at the Engels that was burning for 5 days. They managed to extinguish it after 5 days of controlled burnout. And now it was a refinery that was attacked not far from the Engels. So that is the major update. Also, one of the captured North Koreans also shared some new information. That is what I'm dying to learn right now. But generally, that's it. Dear friends, please be safe and eat well.
Yeah, that's assured, isn't it? That bit's assured, certainly.
They are what we're hearing is that the South Koreans are offering the North Koreans who have been captured the ability to defect to South Korea, which is obviously a great bit of opportunism there. Can I just show this delightful video? So I don't even know, the Croatian president, the incumbent president, has just been voted back in. He is pro-Russian, although some people voted him. I've got some people that commented today said, look, I'm pro-Ukrainian, but I voted for him because of blah blah blah. So it's not the only reason you're going to be voting, right? But he is pro-Russian. And I don't know if people have seen this delightful video of a young guy receiving an award who absolutely, he's got a Ukrainian ribbon on him. He's a Croatian. It goes to shake, I think, probably the prime minister's hand, but doesn't shake the president's hand. And I just love this. So
this
I
is
just
Slovakia, want to, isn't it?
This is no Croatia.
Oh, Croatia. Sorry,
I think this is Croatia. So Milanovic has just been voted back in. So you get this guy coming up, and he's got his proud ribbon on there, shakes your man's hand there, and then look at him. No, thank you very much. I love it. I just love that. No, thank you very much. I'm not going to shake your hand, sod off.
What's going on his face? Is that a shadow, or is that a weird moustache?
I think it's a shadow. Rather, I think it's
right.
the resolution of the video is not great. But I just thought that was a nice way to end. Nothing like saying, no, I don't want anything. And a young guy in Croatia being pro-Ukraine is always good.
Yeah. I'm not shaking the hand that shook Putin's hand. No, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
OS, I hope you join us again at another occasion. We've been we're doing more of these, and we've been delighted to have Rick, the Ukrainian, on, and I know you're a good chum of Rick's, and yeah, we're going to be doing more of these, and hopefully, because the audience seem to get a lot out of it, and it's a slightly more relaxed format than the interview format, and we can meander all over the place on different topics, and yeah, they seem to go quite well.
That's what cool people do, meander around just babbling on about nothing. That's how I roll. But no,
sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Starsky. It's been a long time coming, so it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. So thank you very much. Thanks to all the viewers as well. Thanks to Michael Fuchar there, who is super generous as well. And I guess the last thing that I would like to say is Slava Ukraini.
Heroям
Slava.
Absolutely.
Smert varagam. Was that the other one I've been learning? Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get our learning on, don't we? I suppose. But yes. Last words for OS.
I will not will not tell you anything new. I will only say thank you for supporting Ukraine, and you must remember this: your support can be felt very easily. It's when people in Ukraine wake up tomorrow alive, and they will see the sunshine due to you, due to your support, not only with any humanitarian, military aid, political struggle and things like that, but also with your supportive commentaries to Ukrainian people, Ukrainian soldiers, as well as Ukrainian civilians. Thank you so much on behalf of Ukrainian people. I'm so honored to have such a family like you, such an international, absolutely amazing community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deeply humbling. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take care all, and thanks to OS. Stay on the line, everyone, and see you all later.
Be safe.